Hi there, boys and girls. We are now into the next two chapters of the book 11 by Tom Rogers. Yesterday we left off with Mac and Alex having a friendship bond where they had things in common, they realized. Even though they were totally different ages, they still were able to form a friendship based on things that they had in common. And one thing that they found out that they both had in common were they both had the love of airplanes. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to pick up with chapter 34 called The Man in the White Shirt. And we're going to now go to his viewpoint for a little bit and see what's going on in his life and what's going on during this day on September 11th, 2001. Here we go. 6:02 p.m. The man in the white shirt saw it first, streaking in from the northwest. He watched it bank sharply and head straight for them. Within seconds, people around him saw it, and before long, everyone on the bridge had turned to look. An anxious murmur ran through the crowd. A woman beside him gave a frightened gasp. "Oh no," she whispered. The man in the white shirt put a comforting hand on her elbow. "It's okay," he reassured her. "It's an F-15. It's one of ours." Now, what is he talking about? It's one of ours? He's talking about an airplane. So he obviously knows about airplanes because he called it an F-15. And he recognized that it's one of ours. Now, if you think about it, planes have not been flying that whole day after the morning. What are the airline industry, what they did was they decided to ground all airplanes flying over the continents, but also over the continental United States, but they also grounded all the airplanes coming into the United States from other countries. They had to send them to different airports because they didn't want any planes coming in to the territory of the United States of America because they didn't know if they were going to be attacked anymore. So they had to ground all the planes. So it was just strange that all of a sudden they just see this low-flying aircraft hovering over their city, the city that had just been attacked. So of course it's going to bring some fear into people, wouldn't it? It absolutely would. And so that's why they were very afraid. Now the people also were having to walk across a bridge. Think about it. The system that carried people from outside the city to the city, the train that Alex's dad drove, or that he was the conductor of, they were shut down. So people had to actually walk. They didn't have their cars because a lot of people don't drive cars in New York because it's a big city. So they rely on bus transportation, which they do still have working, but the trains, they stopped them. So that way people couldn't use those to get to where they needed to go. So let's go back to the man in the white shirt on that bridge. Here we go. So they're crossing the bridge because they couldn't use the train system, the path train system, to get them to out from the city. Here we go. Let's go back. All right. The needle-nosed jet rocketed past, twin engines screaming. The roar was deafening. The woman threw her hands over her ears. They watched as it flew straight down the length of the island, so low it seemed to barely skim the tops of the skyscrapers. As it cleared the tip of Manhattan and raced out over the harbor, the woman finally breathed a sigh of relief. "How did you know?" she asked. "I know planes," he shrugged. The woman left him with a grateful nod, and then fell back in with the crowd, making its way across the George Washington Bridge, the massive suspension bridge connecting Manhattan to New Jersey. Normally, the bridge delivered thousands of cars and trucks into New York every day. Now, all traffic into the island had been blocked. Everyone on the bridge was headed away, headed home. The man in the white shirt lingered a moment on the bridge, staring after the plane as it continued on beyond the skyline, dragging a white vapor line behind it like a string. It was the first plane since he'd seen all day, and he couldn't take his eyes off of it. He watched as it receded into the distance, growing smaller and smaller until it seemed to just float there, frozen in place like a model plane hanging from a wire. Just like home, he thought. He felt a twinge of guilt. He had no business staring at planes when the one who depended on him, they were still waiting. He turned away and continued his long march home. Okay, boys and girls, so we had a little clue there of who it might be. It said, like a model plane hanging from a wire. So obviously this person, the man in the white shirt, really likes planes enough that he has model planes. We do know that Mac's son Bobby and Mac have model planes inside their garage. That's where they were, that he and Alex were looking at, the planes that were in his garage. But we also do know that Alex's dad loves planes too, because remember when Alex would, when he was little, he had memories of going to the air shows with his dad, and he and his dad just know a lot about planes. And so, in fact, in Alex's room, I believe, I remember reading earlier in the book that half of his side of the room, on his side of the room, he had plane models. And so we know that both the man in the white shirt could either be the man in the white shirt could either be Alex's dad, we've come down to this, or it could be Mac's son Bobby. Just with all the clues that have been dropped, we can infer that it would be either one of those two, but we just don't know who. So let's keep reading. Here we go. Chapter 35, Faces, 6:37 p.m. Okay, now it's getting to be evening, so Alex definitely needs to get home. Alex stared out the bus window, searching the faces on the street. He was looking for his father, hoping to spot him in the crowd, making his way home. He knew it was a long shot. Right now, his dad could be anywhere, even at Ground Zero. Now, Ground Zero is the term that you call where the planes were hit at the World Trade Center. We called that the Ground Zero. He couldn't stop thinking about it. The planes hitting, the billowing smoke, the towers as they fell. He closed his eyes, but that only made it worse. The fireball, the smoke, the collapse, over and over on a constant loop in his brain. Do you think that's why his mom told him don't turn on the TV? Because she knew that her son probably couldn't handle seeing those images and being able to process it all without having a lot of fear. You know, sometimes moms knows best, huh? All right, let's keep going. He blinked and wiped a tear off of his cheek. He heard sniffling and looked around. He wasn't the only one on the bus crying quietly. Something cool and wet brushed his hand. It was Radar, licking the salty drop off his fingers. Alex gazed down at Radar. Greatest dog ever. When Alex looked back up, he caught eyes with the woman across the aisle. She wore a hotel maid's uniform, gray with a white collar. Her shoulders were hunched, her brow creased. But when her gaze connected with Alex's, her eyes went soft, and she gave him a tiny smile. Alex looked around at the other passengers. He and Nunu rode the bus all the time, and he was used to seeing what they called bus face, the blank stare most riders wore to avoid making eye contact with the people around them. He sometimes played a game with Nunu, where they'd each put on their best bus face and see who could hold it the longest, staring ahead like wide-eyed zombies until one of them, usually Nunu, lost it and got the giggles. But today was different. Everyone looked kind of sad. Some kept their gaze on the floor, others watched intently out the window, but there was no sign of bus face anywhere. And then it happened again. He caught eyes with a man in a suit. The man nodded and gave him a little smile. Incredible! 4 times in one day? And that didn't even count the bus driver, who didn't give him any trouble about bringing Radar on board. Alex felt a tap on his shoulder and jerked around, startled. It was a lady in the seat behind him, a middle-aged Hispanic woman in a flowered dress. She was holding up his Game Boy. It fell out of your bag. Oh, thanks. She gave him a kind smile and turned away. That makes 5, Alex thought to himself. Nunu watched him put away the Game Boy and then went back to reading the picture book in her lap. Alex turned back to the window. Down a side street, he saw a boy about his age burst out of his front door, sprinting down the sidewalk, and jump into the arms of a man getting out of a car. Okay, so when Alex saw that scene, seeing a boy out the window jumping into his dad's arms when he sees that his dad got home, you know that's probably what Alex was hoping for, that he would be able to do the same thing when he got home. Okay, let's keep going. Alex watched for as long as he could until the bus went through a short tunnel. For a brief moment, there was nothing but darkness beyond the window, and Alex's face was suddenly reflected back to him in the glass. He saw the wet streak on his cheek and looked away, embarrassed. The bus pulled over at the next stop. Radar stiffened, back straight, ears pricked. He growled. Okay, so whenever dogs start growling, you can tell that they sense danger. So Radar is sensing some danger on the bus right now. Let's see what happens. Alex followed Radar's eyes. It was Calvin, one of Jordan's goons, coming down the aisle. Alex sat up. He didn't know why, but he didn't feel scared. Something was different about Calvin. And then it hit him. Calvin wasn't smirking or cracking his knuckles or trying to act all tough. He just looked like a regular kid. Calvin froze when he spotted Alex. Alex stared back. Calvin broke his gaze and looked away, then down at Radar, whose bandaged ear twitched back and forth. He okay? Yeah. Calvin shifted his weight from one foot to the other, his eyes on the floor. Oh, we didn't mean to hurt him. Alex shook his head. Yes, you did. Yeah, Calvin nodded. Sorry. Seriously, thought Alex. An apology from Calvin? He considered pinching himself to see if he was dreaming, but he played it cool and just nodded. And then Calvin surprised him again. Jordan's a jerk sometimes. All the time? Yeah. Alex noticed a purplish bruise on Calvin's cheek and remembered something from earlier that day. Just before Jordan threw the bottle, Alex remembers seeing him take a swing at Calvin and shove him aside. A completely crazy thought occurred to Alex. Had Calvin been trying to stop Jordan from throwing the bottle? Alex pointed at Calvin's cheek. Jordan gave you that? Calvin was silent a long time. Yeah, he mumbled. I tried, said Calvin, his voice trailing off. Amazing. Hey, why do you hang out with him? Asked Alex. Calvin shrugged. Who else am I going to hang out with? Alex knew it was true. He studied Calvin's face. Calvin's gaze was still glued to the floor. He couldn't look Alex in the eye. Both of them were unsure what the next move should be. They might have stayed that way all night if Alex hadn't suddenly noticed the street signs outside. He reached over and yanked the bell cord and then nudged Nunu, who put away her picture book. It's my stop, said Alex. Calvin stepped aside to let them pass. See you tomorrow, I guess, said Calvin. Alex shrugged. Whatever. Then something inside him made him stop. He didn't like the way that sounded. He turned back towards Calvin. Hey, Calvin, is your family okay after, Calvin looked surprised. Then he nodded. Yeah. Alex hustled Radar and Nunu to the door while Calvin continued down the aisle, halfway to the back. Calvin turned around and called to Alex. Hey, what about yours? But Alex was already gone. The doors closed with a hiss, and the bus moved on. Okay, so with that chapter, we can see that people change, possibly. Maybe when something happens, they realize maybe they should change their ways. And Alex is realizing that Calvin may not be as bad as he thought he might be. And this might be a turning point. Maybe he can become a friend to him. We'll, never know. But the nice thing is it does show that people can change their behavior and they can actually have a second chance. So think about that next time you might make a mistake or something. Think about how maybe you can have a second chance on becoming friends with somebody who you never would be friends with, maybe. So keep that in mind. All right, we will be reading chapter 36 tomorrow. So see you then. Enjoy. Bye-bye.